Today's episode is one that has been on my mind for quite some time. Most times we focus on the direct perpetrators of crime and what made them the way they are. In reality, most perpetrators would not commit the amount of crime they did had they not had help. That was the case with the notorious French serial killer Michel Fourinet, who was said to have been aided and abetted by his wife, Monique Oliver. Monique was said to be an accomplice to some of Fourinet's crimes, including the abduction and murder of several young women in France and Belgium during the 1980s and 1990s. Note that Michel Fourinet was convicted of several murders and sexual between 1987 and 2003. Monique met Michel while he was serving a prison sentence for sexual assault in the early 1980s. Monique worked as a volunteer visitor at the prison that Michel was held. The two quickly began a romantic relationship and were eventually married in 1987. Together, they committed a number of gruesome crimes, with Monique often helping Michel lure victims into their car or abduct them from the street. It was said that Michel was obsessed with the idea of virginity. After he discovered that his first wife wasn't a virgin, he became obsessed with the idea. This idea was what pushed him to commit several sex crimes for which he went to prison. When he met Monique in prison, they would often write to each other as pen pals. He revealed to Monique of his fantasies of assaulting and murdering virginal girls. Monique validated his feelings, and they made a pact that he would kill Monique's husband for her, and in return, she would help him find and kidnap victims. As you can see, the relationship was started on a very bad note. Even though these two made a pact to kill Monique's husband, but it does not appear that Fourinet kept his own end of the bargain. Monique's husband was reported to still be alive during the time the pair committed their crimes. After his release from prison in 1987, Michel and Monique would use various methods to lure their victims to their death. One of their common methods was to offer young girls and women a ride, especially those who were hitchhiking. They would pretend to be a friendly couple and offer their victims a lift in their car. Once the victims were inside the car, Michel would overpower them, tie them up, and take them to secluded locations where he would and murder them. Michel also posed as a professional photographer and offered to take pictures of young girls and women. He would approach his victims on the streets or in public places, pretending to be interested in their looks or offering them a modeling opportunity. He would then lure them to a secluded location where he would assault and murder them. Monique and Michel would also post fake job advertisements, particularly for nanny positions. When young girls or women responded to the ads, they would be invited for an interview. Once the victims arrived at a designated location, the couple would kidnap them and take them to a secluded location where Michel would assault and murder them. Monique and Michel also used gifts to lure their victims. They would approach young girls and women in public places, offering them gifts such as perfumes or jewelry. Once the victims accepted the gift, Michel would invite them to his car or a secluded location where he would assault and murder them. The first known victim of the couple was Isabelle Laville, a 17-year-old girl who disappeared in 1987. She was last seen hitchhiking in the Yonne region of France. Her body was never found, but Michel later confessed to kidnapping, assaulting and killing her and then dumping her body in a river. The couple's next victim was Fabienne Leroy, a 20-year-old student who disappeared in 1988 in the Ardennes region of France. She was last seen getting into a car with a man who matched Michel's description. Her body was found several years later in a forest with evidence of sexual assault and strangulation. In 1990, Michel kidnapped and assaulted a 13-year-old girl named Elizabeth Brichet in Belgium. She managed to escape and report the crime, but Michel was not caught in time and he went about committing other crimes. In 2001, Michel and Monique kidnapped and murdered a 22-year-old Belgian woman named Celine Sisson. She was lured into their car by Monique, who pretended to be lost and asked for directions. Sisson was then drugged and taken to a remote location where she was assaulted and murdered. Her body was found several months later, buried in a forest. The couple's next known victim was a 21-year-old French woman named Mananya Thumpong, who disappeared in 2001. She was last seen getting into a car with Michel. Her body was found buried in a forest in Belgium in 2002. In 2003, Michel kidnapped and murdered a 19-year-old French woman, Estelle Morzin. She was on her way home from school when she was abducted by Michel, who had been stalking her for several days. Her body has never been found, but Michel later confessed to the crime. In the same year, Michel and Monique attempted to abduct a young girl in Belgium, which ultimately led to their capture. The girl was 13-year-old Celine Sisson, who was walking home from school in the town of Beatrix, Belgium, when Michel and Monique attempted to abduct her. Fortunately, Celine managed to fight off her attackers and escaped. She reported the incident to the police, who were able to track down and arrest Michel and Monique. During their subsequent interrogations, the couple did not admit to any wrongdoing. 1 year later, Monique confessed to her husband killing at least 8 women, including that of Estelle Morzin, a 9-year-old French girl who had disappeared earlier that year. DNA evidence found on the mattress in Michel's van matched that of some of his victims. The couple was extradited to France, where they helped police find some of the bodies of their victims. As a result, Michel Fourinet was convicted of 7 murders, but it is believed that he may have committed more. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died in prison in 2021. In addition to her involvement in Michel's crimes, Monique was also convicted of multiple offenses of her own, including kidnapping and complicity in murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 28 years. Neither of the couple appealed their sentences. Despite her involvement in some of Fournet's most heinous crimes, Monique has remained a somewhat enigmatic figure. Some have described her as a passive accomplice who was under Michel's control, while others have suggested that she was a willing participant who enjoyed the thrill of the crimes. Whatever the case may be, her involvement in Michel's crimes has cemented her place in the annals of true crime history. Until next time, humans, stay safe out there.